welcome. We're so excited for you to join us for our third session of the Triton Talks webinar series. We'll be hearing about part of the Triton Initiative's environmental monitoring field trials campaign today from Cailene Gunn, who is an exceptional science communicator, research scientist, and STEM outreach ambassador. So we're really lucky to hear about her insight in SciComm. She'll be diving into the strategies, successes, and lessons learned from the first year of implementing Triton's communication framework. And just a few logistical notes for attendees today. We are using a Zoom webinar setup, which this means that we've muted you so that there are no interruptions during the presentation. But if you have questions that come up, we really do encourage you to type them out. We want to hear your questions, so ask them in the chat. And I'll be looking over them during the presentation, and later during our Q&A session, I'll read them out loud and make sure that your questions are answered. We are recording this webinar and will later post the recorded video on YouTube. We have a playlist, the Triton Talks webinar playlist. So if you want to reference this later or share it with a friend or view a webinar that you missed, you can find it there. We'll also be including a few helpful links and resources or relevant articles in the chat. So make sure you keep your eye out for those. We have a link tree that Cailene set up with lots of information about Triton that we think you'll find interesting. And from there, I think I'll let Cailene take it away.
Thank you, Nolani, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Cailene Gunn. I am an earth scientist with a background in coastal ecology, specifically biogeochemistry of wetlands. But I've always been interested in human impacts on the environment and have worked as both a researcher and science communicator on the Triton Initiative and other marine energy projects. Over the past couple of years, my career has really been dedicated to diving into science communication, STEM education, and outreach, and I now lead communications for the Triton Initiative, which is the topic of today's talk. I want to take a moment to thank some of my colleagues, Alicia Amerson and Joe Haxel of the Triton Initiative, and Kelsey Adkison and the whole PNNL communications team. Without them, none of this work would be possible, so thank you. So marine energy is an emerging renewable energy resource with massive potential for the US and worldwide. The industry is currently in its testing and development phase. And one of the areas of uncertainty for regulators and permitting decision makers is in regards to the potential environmental effects of introducing these novel devices into coastal and riverine ecosystems. In order to make informed decisions for the industry, it's critical that these stakeholders have access to data and research findings surrounding this environmental effects issue. It's important to communicate that researchers are concerned with the safety and sustainability of marine energy systems, and there is a lot of innovative research going on to measure and understand these possible impacts. One of the projects researching these topics is the Triton Initiative. So Triton is a Department of Energy Water Power Technologies Office project that aims to help reduce barriers to testing and permitting of marine energy devices by researching and developing monitoring technologies to understand these potential impacts. To do this, Triton supports industry partners, innovates technologies, and performs field tests to explore scientifically defendable monitoring methods and instrumentation. The Triton Field Trials is a project that specifically evaluates and conducts field tests on technologies used to study specific potential environmental stressors associated with marine energy systems. And these include changes in habitat, underwater noise, collision risk, and electromagnetic fields. The project is now publishing recommendations based on this research in a journal of Marine Science and Engineering special issue entitled Technology and Methods for Environmental Monitoring of Marine Renewable Energy. This special issue is a collection of recommendations and considerations for the industry based on Triton field trials, but also to include considerations like predictive modeling, anthropogenic light, and it is also an opportunity for us to share our science communication work and how outreach and dissemination of our research findings can help amplify our project mission and support the industry. This is the whole topic of today, is Triton Communications Framework. Beginning in 2020, we developed a communications task to increase exposure to our project, to maximize the impact of our research, and to better understand how we as a project can address some of the needs of the industry in the environmental monitoring space. This framework was designed to be an iterative process where we tested communications avenues and adapted based on successes and trial and error. So today I'll be talking about the preliminary outcomes from the first year and change of implementing our framework, and hopefully we'll demonstrate the value of science communication for projects in this industry. So any framework starts with establishing achievable goals that support the project mission and identify key audiences. So the goals for our pilot communications framework were: 1, to increase awareness about marine energy and environmental monitoring research like Triton's being done to address regulatory concerns in the industry, and 2, to develop and refine tactics to inform stakeholders and audiences about our research. We mapped audiences with the help of our research team, our project sponsor, and Ocean Energy Systems Environmental Initiative, which is a sister project focused on the dissemination of information and outreach to marine energy stakeholders around the world. So tapping into this network was really valuable. The 3 key audiences we identified were research partners, which includes the private sector, subject matter experts in environmental monitoring, academia, and state and federal agencies that we may work with. Marine energy stakeholders, which includes developers, regulators, consultants, and marine energy end users. And then general audiences, so the science interested public, nonprofit organizations, and communities and industries with ties to marine energy testing locations who may have the ability to influence the trajectory of the industry. So then we selected channels to reach those audiences. We first started with simple website updates to make sure our project information was accurate and up to date. Later, we then expanded the website to include information about the team, how to work with us, and then to host and promote our communications content on. As sort of a proof of concept, we launched a Triton Stories blog, which is a monthly informal blog that really dives into specific research topics and the humans behind Triton science. So we launched 3 months as sort of our pilot, and in that 3 months, we observed very clear increases in website traffic on days we published those stories. So that is something we continued and we saw as an opportunity to drive audiences to the website. From there, we continued the Triton Stories blog, which we still publish every month. And then we also established additional channels alongside PNNL's communications team. We established a presence on PNNL's social media. So that includes LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We launched a monthly newsletter. And we started to participate in webinars and presentations more strategically to reach our various audiences. As we rolled out these various channels, it was important to think about how to measure success for each. This is challenging to do because metrics for each channel are different and only provide some level of insight into how the audience is accessing your information. As a scientist and our team of scientists, we are used to certain types of data. So this took some recalibration. We were lucky to be able to work with PNNL's amazing team of communication specialists who helped us determine ways to track metrics over time that would give us some insights into success. One helpful tool was to conduct audience analysis, which we did through our newsletter subscriber list and through surveys. So as newsletter subscribers subscribe, they offer affiliations, and based on that, we were able to categorize our subscribers into key audiences And that helped us understand who was subscribing from this self-selecting group of people. And we were able to see that we were reaching our target there. We also tracked monthly channel-specific metrics. So these are things like page views for the website or impressions for social media, which are any data that we could gather. Tracking that as much as possible was really helpful, just to see patterns in growth and things like that. And then the use of strategic survey questions to track effectiveness was helpful for understanding how successful our communications were, but also helped inform our research. At the launch of the Triton field trials, we participated in a webinar that was really designed to understand the marine energies industry needs for environmental monitoring. And we put together a survey that asked really poignant questions about roles and what those roles needed out of the research, the environmental monitoring research community. And there was overwhelmingly a call for cost-effective technologies. So from then on, a huge consideration for Triton field trials was cost effectiveness when they were exploring technologies. So that's one example of how these feedback loops can inform research in a really positive way. So after a year of implementing our framework, we found that all of our channels were valuable. And we were kind of we were throwing the spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. And it turns out, since we have such diverse audiences, all of our channels were valuable in different ways. The website was really our hub for all of our content, where we could host new content, archive old content, and have all of the information about our project in one place. Triton Stories accounted for about 50% of page views for the entire Triton website and continue to be read far after publication. Our newsletter consistently performed well, with about open rates of about double the industry average, which we were very happy with. Social media were really useful for cross-promotion of content and increasing exposure to larger platforms and networks, especially to science-interested audiences. And then, like I mentioned earlier, post-webinar survey results helped inform our research. So to dive into the social media a little bit more, because social media is a really helpful tool for science, we found that each social media platform sort of had its own personality. For us, LinkedIn was best for promoting the blog and events and tapping into more professional networks. Facebook had the most engagements, so the number of likes, shares, comments, things like that. Twitter contributed the largest number of impressions, or the number of times the content is displayed. And then Instagram was really useful for supporting high-level awareness of science topics like marine energy in general or environmental monitoring. And we used quizzes and videos and things like that to really get that information out there. Consistently, we saw that blog views increased on days when corresponding social media posts were released. So again, that cross-promotion was really valuable through social media. Here on the right are some examples of our most successful Instagram or social media posts, and I'll go into some of the elements that make these posts successful. At the core of effective science communication is compelling content. So the more compelling your picture or your post, the more likely you're going to get engagements. Capturing research in action is one great way to build curiosity and invite people into the scientific process. It also builds transparency and credibility, and also just invites people to learn more. We found that strategic graphics were particularly helpful for marine energy topics because a lot of people don't understand what these devices look like or what these monitoring technologies look like, and using illustrations to paint that picture was really helpful. Short and shareable videos were something that we got a lot of bang for our buck on. You can really concisely explain what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why in a short video that's very topic specific, and being able to share those and post them to the website was a really helpful tool. And then lastly, highlighting humans is really important and really humanizing the science. There was a study that was done that showed that scientists who selfie are more approachable, but no less knowledgeable than scientists who are in more traditional scientific lab settings. And anecdotally, any photo we posted of scientists smiling was more likely to get clicked on. And we really want to show that there are humans behind the science, and it's really collaborative work. It also helps build a more inclusive, approachable culture around science, which is something that's really important to us. So some of our key strategies and lessons learned were that, one, we needed to use diverse tactics to reach our broad audiences, and tailoring content to the level of technicality for our audiences was super helpful and important. Partnerships with collaborators really helped bolster our content and increase exposure. This photo here is a snip from a video that we made in collaboration with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Our TFIT, or Triton Field Trials collision risk team, went up to Alaska to conduct some research, and during the pandemic, it was really hard to capture field content. So we collaborated on the University of Alaska getting footage. We helped write a script, and together we made this video, and it's one of the best performing videos we have. We got to expose it to both of our communities. It was just something that really continues to serve the Triton project. The first year of implementing a framework is super important for establishing a baseline for future measurement and growth and comparison. So careful tracking of metrics and patterns and any number you could possibly get is really important for creating that baseline to work from in the future. As I mentioned earlier, success is really challenging to quantify. So getting as much information as possible was really helpful for understanding what was working and what wasn't and how to adapt. And then we also learned that more robust survey work is necessary to quantify impact. In social science, surveys are the gold standard for quantifying impact. And we learned that we need to incorporate that direct feedback a little bit more to understand any change in understanding or perception as a result of our content. There is a saying that science isn't complete until it's well communicated. So using Triton's communications framework as a bit of a case study, we recommend that marine energy projects implement some sort of communications framework. Right now, the industry has an opportunity to be transparent about our scientific research and what's informing the progress, and communication plays a really important role in that. We started pretty big, but you don't need to. Communications frameworks can start small with a website and possibly a monthly or quarterly newsletter, maybe one social media platform, and then build based on what's most effectively reaching audiences. And then we also ask that you share, if you implement a framework, share and publish your results. We would love to learn from each other and sort of create a culture of communications in the marine energy space. I also want to acknowledge that more traditional avenues for sharing science are also really helpful for getting information out there to more technical communities. So we published our results, our outcomes, everything we did for developing this framework in the Journal of Marine Science and Engineering special issue. So scientists and people in the technical community can also learn a bit about the work we've done. And I believe Nolani will put a link in the chat to this paper. So if you want to learn more about this work, feel free to go give it a look. Our newest launch of communications content is this webinar series. So I wanted to talk about some of the upcoming webinars. Next month, Molly Greer will be talking about electromagnetic fields monitoring. The webinars are held every third Thursday of the month. We try to keep them short and sweet and really just dive into specific aspects of our research. So we encourage you to check these out. If you can't go to the webinar, we will also post recordings like Nolani said. And if you want to register for the next webinar, there is a QR code here, and I believe we'll put a link in the chat. And then also stay connected. We encourage you to visit our website. You can find all of our content there. We also have a link tree that links to everything. You can scan this QR code if you want to go to that. We encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, read our monthly stories blog, enjoy the other webinars that are upcoming, and then feel free to email us at any point at tritonmre@pnnl.gov. And with that, thank you so much for listening, and we'll open it up to questions.
So like we talked about in the beginning, if you do have a question, oh, I hear something. Nope, not somebody asking. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat. Or if you'd like to unmute yourself, I have allowed everybody to be able to do that since we have a smaller audience today. If you'd like to speak up and ask a question, go ahead. If you're more comfortable putting it in the chat, that is also great, and I'll read it out loud for you. And in the meantime, we do have one question to start off with. Cailene, how do you evaluate what efforts are most successful and worth continuing?
So it really depends. Like I said, there are a lot of ways we track our success and our effectiveness. A lot of the times we'll just look at raw numbers and see what's getting the most attention and is being viewed the most, but feedback is really important. So whenever we get feedback, hearing that the industry is, able to use our recommendations, or feedback on people reading our stories and having some sort of reaction to it, that's how we know things are really successful, but we can't know that without feedback. So surveys are the way we do that. I know many people are experiencing survey fatigue, but anytime you can offer feedback or ideas on how we can improve, that's really, really helpful. We really want to make sure that we're creating content that's useful for our audiences.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Edward Henry. What process did you use to define your stakeholders?
That's a fantastic question. So we worked with, as I had mentioned, we worked with a sister project called Ocean Energy Systems Environmental Initiative, and they're really focused on marine energy stakeholders and outreach and engagement throughout the world. So we really talked with them about who to engage in these conversations, because we have similar missions and they have an amazing network to tap into. So we worked with them quite a bit. And then we also worked with our team to identify subject matter experts and potential research partners that we may want to work with in the future. Anybody really in the environmental monitoring aspect of the industry, we want to be interacting with our content. So we worked with the team, we worked with our sponsor, and we worked with similar projects to really figure out who those audiences were and how to engage them.
Awesome, thank you. Another question. This is a great question from Joe Haxel. If you had budget to use only one of these platforms to reach the broadest non-technical audience possible, which would you choose?
I think that is a fabulous question. I think the website is really the thing that has it all and has the ability to adapt to whoever's coming to it. So we have more general descriptions of what we do. There's a lot more technical information if you want it. So I think really diving into the website and making sure there's resources for everyone would be the most valuable use of budget if we could only do one thing. Luckily, we're not limited to that, but the website is really how you can really expose your project to a broader audience. If you're doing search engine optimization, you can really try to increase exposure to your website. So there are ways to really dive into that and make that one piece of content really valuable.
Great. Another question from Alicia Amerson. How do you determine which stakeholder you are targeting with a piece of communication content?
That is also a great question. So there are a couple ways to do that. Audience analysis is a great way. If you have affiliation information, oftentimes you can get a sense of what that stakeholder does, what their role is. Surveys are the best way to do this because you can actually get information about that person's role in the industry and how they're accessing your information. But for things like page views and social media impressions, we don't have information on that final scale. So we really have to take advantage of opportunities where we are getting direct feedback or specific audience roles from the industry. And this is something we're still working on. There are a lot of ways to engage with stakeholders and get information. And there's been a lot of research in the social science world and communications world on how to do this. And that's something we're hoping to improve in the future.
Great, thank you. Well, we have lots of questions today. I think we have time for one or two more, and we have another one from Eduardo Santiago. As researchers, what part of your time do you dedicate to communication? For example, how many hours a week?
This is a question that's a little bit hard to answer because the way Triton is set up, we have lots of different roles that contribute to our communications. I, as the lead, spend about half my time working on Triton's communications, and we were lucky to propose funding and work with our sponsor to get funded to do this work. We also have colleagues in the PNNL communications team who their permanent role, their full role is in communications, and they support these efforts. And then we do ask that our technical researchers also provide information and support communications. And I would say maybe an hour a week or so. Sometimes we'll ask our researchers to get involved in this. So it's hard to put an exact number on it, but as the lead of this, it's about half of my time.
Okay, maybe our last question. What do you think is the most valuable communications activity for your project?
So this kind of goes along with Joe's question. I think the website is something that we don't have other content without, because it's where we host everything. It's really the central hub of all of our information about our project. So I would say the website for the broad audiences, but I also think our newsletter is particularly valuable because a self-selecting group of people decides and opts into our newsletter, which is an invaluable thing. And it means we can tailor our content to who's subscribing, and we can ensure that we're creating content that those audiences might appreciate or want to learn more about. So having a newsletter with subscribers who really want to be there is something that from a communications perspective is really special, and we really honor that. So I would say website and newsletter are the things that maybe excite me the most and have really great impact.
Great, thank you. I think we're out of time now. Those were all such great questions. Thank you for joining us. Like Cailene said, you can find all of this content, our newsletter, the blog posts, all of this is in that tree link. So follow that and make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. You'll find lots of information. We do have a survey that we would love for you to fill out because SciComm, we need this feedback to better cater our work and outreach. So I've included the link in the chat. Please take 5 minutes to complete that. And we're so happy that you joined us today. Hopefully we'll see you in May for the next session.
Thank you so much for being here.